Nigeria now has 3,526 coronavirus cases with confirmation of 381 new cases by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC.
Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 urges state governments to take the welfare and security of coronavirus patients seriously.
We urge all state governments to continue to pay attention to the welfare of people in isolation and for security agencies to provide adequate security around such facilities to prevent escape.
President Buhari commends Akinwumi Adesina on vote of confidence by Board of Directors, African Development Bank, ADB.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we continue our conversation on COVID-19 with a focus on the elderly.
All right, now there's a saying that you live your life every day, but you can only die once. But how one dies should be of utmost importance, and I have no doubt in my mind that we all do care about how we live our lives, and specifically about the welfare of the aged and the elderly in the society. Kingsley?
You're right, Claire. I mean, there's no doubt about it. That is the aspiration of everyone to live well into ripe old age. And how exactly you achieve that will depend on a number of factors, including lifestyle choices and quality health care.
Absolutely. Lifestyle choices and quality health care. Of course, Kingsley, if you know, it is everyone's desire to grow old, as we have said. But unfortunately, since the outbreak of the coronavirus across the world, medical experts have maintained that older adults are at significantly increased risk of severe disease. And that's, of course, following infection from COVID-19 that includes or that may afflict people with what we called comorbidity. That's people who are living with underlying illnesses.
That's right, Claire. Now, recent statistics from the World Health Organization indicate that about 95% of COVID-19 deaths occurred in persons who are 60 years and above, and that more than 50% of all deaths were of persons who are 80 years or older.
Indeed, and still from that report, 8 out of 10 deaths are occurring in individuals with at least one underlying sickness, and in particular those with cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, diabetes, but also with a range of other chronic, illnesses.
Well, at the recent launch of a new policy initiative to address COVID-19 and other challenges faced by the elderly, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said COVID-19 fatality rate for people over 80 years old is said to be 5 times the global average. And of course, this is during what we are seeing now in terms of the worst public health crisis that has hit the world in a century.
And also, just by way of information, a United Nations or a UN independent expert did say on the adjournment of all human rights by older persons that, and we'll quote, "We need to stand up now for older persons' rights. Pervasive gerontophobia, the fear, that's the fear of age-related self-degeneration and death, not just prejudice against older people, discrimination, and ultimately the denial of human rights in older age," unquote. So how do we protect, care, and support the elderly in the midst of a pandemic such as COVID-19? How can the elderly stay safe in these perilous times? And how can medical attention reach them for existing health conditions, while, of course, staying free of the coronavirus and staying at home? I am Claire Dilabo Abdul Razak, welcoming you to the program. Good morning, Kingsley.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Claire to also welcome you to this edition of the program. As always, we are transmitting on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're right here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital city. Well, in the course of the program, we'll have our regular companion segments, and this will include newspaper review, business, and others. But in the meantime, let's take the highlights of the morning news, and here is our colleague Comfort Amodu.
Good morning, Kingsley and Claire. Here is the morning news. Now, the Nigerian Center for Disease Control and CDC has announced 381 new cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria, increasing the number of confirmed cases to 3,526 till date. Of the 381 new cases, 183 are in Lagos, 55 in Kano, 44 in Jigawa, 19 each in Zamfara and Bauchi, while 11 is in Katsina, 9 in Borno, 8 in Kwara, 7 in Kaduna, 6 in Gombe, 5 in Ogun, 4 in Sokoto, 3 each in Oyo and Rivers, and 2 in Niger, and 1 each of Akwa Ibom, Enugu and Plateau State. Now, Lagos State has now a total of 1,491 cases, followed by Kano with 482, while FCT has 316 cases confirmed. 601 patients have been discharged with 107 deaths recorded so far. State governments have been urged to take the welfare and security of COVID-19 patients serious in order to prevent cases of escape and restiveness. Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chairman of the Task Force, Boss Mustafa, said this at the daily briefing in Abuja.
Increasing level of abuse of exemption granted to vehicles conveying specific goods. Reports across the country show that they continue to hide passengers with the intention of ferrying them across state boundaries. Continual transportation of the Almajiris across state borders is still evident. We implore all Nigerians to alert the security agencies whenever they witness the violation of these guidelines.
Every business should invest a little bit in hand washing facilities and sanitizers.
And in the meantime, the United Nations women have donated more than 38 million naira to the Federal Minister of Women Affairs in Abuja as support for Nigerian women who are worst hit by the effect of the lockdown.
UN Women is very happy to be collaborating with the Ministry of Women's Affairs as part of its humanitarian response. Hope that the support will meet the immediate needs of up to 12,600 vulnerable women and girls by improving their food security and their access to hygiene.
Continue to appreciate and work together to see that Nigerian women are well cared for. These palliatives and whatever we're reaching out to, the poorest of the poor, those who live on daily business to earn their living.
President Muhammadu Buhari and Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Imran Khan, Thursday afternoon had a phone conversation on the global initiative on debt relief canvassed by leaders of the non-aligned movement during an online summit held on Monday. A statement by Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, notes that leaders of the 120-nation organization, the largest after the United Nations, had agreed that the debt relief campaign be launched for developing countries to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and unprecedented health and socio-economic challenges facing most of them. Also, President Muhammadu Buhari congratulated President of the African Development Bank, Nigerian's Akinwumi Adesina, over the clean bill of health given him by Board of Directors of the bank. The report signed by the Chairman Bureau of the Board of Governors, Naili Kaba, indicated the exoneration of Dr. Adesina, of all allegations against him by whistleblowers. President Buhari, in a statement issued by his Special Advisor on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, lauded the AFDB president for serving the African continent well and making his motherland proud. And the Nigerian leader wishes Dr. Adesina greater success in the position of responsibility he occupies. And President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the immediate dissolution of the interim management team of the Bank of Agriculture. Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development announced this in a statement in Abuja. In a letter to the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, President Buhari approved the appointment of Alwan Ali Hassan as an acting managing director for the Bank of Agriculture. Alhan Hassan hails from Kano State and holds a master's degree in business administration. He has served on the management boards of Orient Bank, Uganda, Bank PHB in Gambia, and Platinum Capital and Trust Limited, Nigeria. The presidency has made formal clarification on the recent appointment of Mansour Ahmed on the board of trustees of the Policy Trust Fund. Our statement by Senior Special Assistant to President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, indicates that Mansour Ahmed is actually to represent the organized private sector and not organized labor, as advently announced. Mr. Ahmed being Executive Director, Dangote Group, and President, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, couldn't have been announced as representing the organized labor, and this is regretted. And those are the news highlights for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues shortly with Claire and Kinsley. Good morning.
All right, welcome back. If you've just joined in, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live here on the network service of Africa's largest TV network, the NTA, and thank you for being a part of it. It's time now to check out trending business news with Kulu Mohammed.
Hello and welcome. Good to have you along. Business dividends reach company shareholders after the companies hold annual general meetings. COVID-19 is inhibiting holding such meetings this year, and since imperatives for holding meetings by proxies have also come under attack by the pandemic, the Registrar General Corporate Affairs Commission sets the records right.
Our own position is that we are given a guide, and the use of proxies is an option. As we have said, companies can wait for 18 months if they so desire. There are concerns that people want their dividend. If you delay for up to 18 months, the time value for money, after 18 months, with the fluctuation and the inflationary trends, then what you will have gotten today, because you cannot pay any dividend without holding an annual general meeting. So these are some of the things that we try to do. And the law is evolving. The law is dynamic, I believe. This is a wake-up call for all of us. If in the past our law is silent on electronic meetings, I think this is a time now to start the necessary legislative process that will ensure the amendment of the law.
And President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the reconstituted Board of Directors of Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Company. The chairman of the board is Mrs. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, Minister of Finance, Federal Republic of Nigeria. And finally, let's now head to the floor of Nigerian Stock Exchange to see how it played out on Thursday, the 7th of May, 2020. I am Kulu Muhammad. Do stay safe. Thank you.
Many thanks, Kulu Mohammed, for the business package. Next for us on the program is Super Review.
Okay, let's welcome Bayo Atoyebi here in the studio. Bayo, good morning.
Thank you, Claire.
How were you able to meander your way through down?
Well, the highway was free this morning. So
for you?
Yes.
That's for you coming from the
airport road, yes.
Airport road axis. But for us coming from the MNK axis, that's Maraba, Nyanya, Karu axis, it was hell of a time. Hell of a time. The road was blocked to traffic, and I must say that we had to drive the wrong way, to get here this morning. Kingsley.
All right, so maybe the FCT Department of Transportation, that's the VIO, and others could be contacted, because you're admitting to
yes, the driver had to do that. Yes, we wouldn't get here.
Driving against
against the traffic.
Yeah, okay. So after that, we'll sort out the issue of the lockdown.
Yes.
on that axis. But certainly, it was a problem that was highlighted in our conversation segment yesterday. The chair of the FCT task force on COVID-19 was one of our guests, and the governor of Nasarawa was also there. They said, look, Part of what we are seeing now is that considering the volume of vehicular and human traffic from the suburbs of Nyanya, Maraba, Masaka, all through that axis, they are virtually part of the Federal Capital Territory, even though technically they are in Nasarawa State. And that rather than for the purposes of screening persons who are coming into or out or going out of the Federal Capital Territory, the regular boundary between the FCT and Nasarawa State should now be extended, pushed back to just somewhere around the outskirts of Kefi, which is quite some distance away, so that every other person else, could be treated as being part of the FCT. But that obviously could have happened much earlier, because we don't know how much testing has gone on in these various communities, very heavily populated.
Okay, so just before we take the question I really want to ask is the volume of cars just before 6 a.m. this morning, are they really those on essential duties?
Well, today is one of the work days, and so it's not only essential duty. Monday, Wednesday, Friday are work days, and for civil servants on level 14 and above. So you have an increase in sight. But there's no gainsaying the fact that people take the advantage of the fact that there is ease on lockdown, and they also go out for their own other activities.
Business transactions, yes. That's right. But it's an issue that has to be addressed. All right, so Claire, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Above the name flag says GSM subscribers hit 187.15 million. Internet users grow by 15%. That's page 21. Justice Saleh, who annulled June 12 election, dies at 81. That's page 15. Lawyers tackle federal government's plan to spend $311 million Abacha loot. That's page 9. 300 Nigerians in UK arrived today and set for quarantine, page 8. Late story, of course, is on COVID-19. COVID-19 home-based solution. NAFDAC meets researchers and herbalists over local treatment. Health Ministry asks agency to assess plant-based solution. Kano plans home treatment for coronavirus patients. And the photographs there on the front page come with the court line: lockdown, Wike arrests violators and accuses police of complicity. And there's a report there that the state government is planning to auction the vehicles impounded for violating the lockdown. Kano ex-commissioner sacked for celebrating Abba Kyari's death tests positive, this time to coronavirus as well. Details on page 11. Benue shuts mortuaries, buries indigents brought from Kano, page 14. One killed, many abducted as bandits occupy Niger community. Tribunal reserves judgment in Kogi governorship poll. Jealous Nasarawa pregnant wife kills husband. That's on page 5. In the meantime, the photographs they are using to illustrate that story, one of the governor and then the other of the Inspector General of Police, both of whom are from Nasarawa, but they are neither the husband nor relatives of the wife who has committed this offense. 24 Amajirai Kano returnees test positive in Jigawa and Gombe, pages 9 and 14. Claire.
All right, Kingsley, I think I have almost similar stories on the front page of the Daily Sun, but the lead story, it's on COVID-19, and it reads, COVID-19, we're at war, says federal government. It comes with a number of riders, urges Nigerians to resist efforts by individuals, groups to endanger citizens' collective survival, and then government may be pushed to review guidelines. And just there, if the camera can just tilt a bit up, that's it. You see the picture stories. An interstate commercial vehicle and its passengers intercepted by the Kwara Command of the Federal Road Safety Corps. That's at somewhere at an entry point into Ilorin, the Kwara State capital. It says Eyekori. I hope I got that correct.
Yeah,
it's quite Eyekori. Okay, and you see the interesting thing, Kingsley and Bayo, is that the culprits are usually women and children. And I'm wondering, where are they going to? They look pitiable. Yesterday I saw a woman and her children, I felt so much sympathy for her.
Well, don't forget that the COVID-19 thing is a big scare. Now that the chicken has come home to roost, many were in denial before. Now the reality has done to everyone. You have the lady who left, was it Katsina, for Kogi State to meet her soldier husband. She apparently was afraid to be left alone in Katsina while the husband is in Kogi, but unfortunately, she came with the virus to Ekiti. And she now risks being prosecuted after she has been cured of it. But be that as it may, COVID-19 has permeated every aspect of our life. And that is why there is the challenge upon you and I to make sure that we are very careful about all the measures that have been put in place to help us self-protect ourselves. Meanwhile,
I haven't done yet. I'm
yes,
sorry.
okay.
Let me just take some more stories. At the foot of the paper, 10 Lagos government house staff test positive, and just right there, Sanwo-Olu wife, of course, test negative. I hear that's for the second time or so. Details of that story you can find on page 6. And there are other trending stories, but these are outside stories from the COVID-19. And okay, then just a piece, the earpiece there, the earpiece beside the nameplate, which talks about commissioner sacked for mocking Kyari, test positive. But below that, you see the rider, 25 passengers on flight from Kano to Beirut, test positive as another prof dies. Details of that you can find on pages 6 and 28. Bayo, you want to continue now?
Yes, papers are reporting that the 381 COVID-19 cases reported as at yesterday is the highest in any single day. And this has brought our total to 3,526. Unfortunately, we lost 4 of our competitors again, bringing the total to 107. The cases reported are from 17 states. The other ringing bell that is happening is coming from Kogi, where the Commissioner for Health, Dr. Sakaharuna, is saying that there are pressure on Kogi to declare COVID-19 cases where there are none. And he says that those who are doing this are doing it for politicizing the situation. He emphasizes that the state had established what he described as a first biosafety laboratory for which they were able to manage Lassa fever effectively, and so far they confirmed only 30 cases. He said those accusing the state of cover-up are being mischievous politically. Meanwhile, a patient who broke the interstate ban and was traveling between Lagos to some northern state, has died in the vehicle that broke down at Badegi. In the meantime, the Niger State Task Force on COVID-19 has instruction from His Excellency, the Governor, that they should go there, make sure that the vehicle is repaired, and the passengers and everybody sent back to where they are coming from. This is to emphasize that there's a strict ban on interstate travel. And the other developments is the story that Kingsley read. National Agency for Food, Drug and Administration is meeting with researchers and herbalists, and these are efforts under the auspices of the Complementary and Alternative Medicine of the Federal Ministry of Health to see what can be done about our own homegrown herbal medicines and see to what extent it will go. But meanwhile, the ECOWAS says it has not endorsed any product for use in the sub-region. It's denying the claim that they have adopted the organic COVID of Madagascar for use in the West African sub-region. However, there are indications that Equatorial Guinea and Guinea-Bissau, as well as Niger, have received some consignment of the COVID organic from Madagascar. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says there is no published scientific studies on the Madagascar COVID organic drug, and therefore it is risky for anybody to continue to use it. But what are the indications in Madagascar? Madagascar so far has 193 cases. There have been 101 recoveries and no death. So is the drug working? Time will tell. In Yobe State government is to investigate alleged hundreds of deaths in Potiskum, Gashua and Unguru. The Commissioner of Health, Dr. Muhammad Lawans Ghana, says that autopsy will be conducted to ascertain the deaths. He, however, emphasized that during the hot season, there is usually increase in mortalities, but whatever the case is, they will make sure that they get their fingers on the causes of the death of the persons. Meanwhile, the first batch of Nigerian evacuees from United States, 270, are expected to depart New York, and reports indicate that they are likely to arrive on Sunday. But meanwhile, there are some challenges because the Nigerian consulate in New York has indicated that the service that is available on the Ethiopian airline is going to be on first come, first served basis. And also, you must make sure that your immigration status is clarified. But the persons are also complaining that the airfare that was originally between $1,300 and $1,700 has all of a sudden increased by $204 to $1,904. So they are also complaining.
Well, all right, those are some of the challenges that come with the time, COVID-19, the new normal. But let's quickly take a look.
Sorry, I'll just, before, yesterday we were discussing this issue of using foreign airlines, to ferry back Nigerians who are, as it were, stranded abroad on account of COVID-19. Ethiopian Airlines, Emirates Airlines, and so on and so forth. And the point has to be made. The airline operators of Nigeria have also issued a statement up against that particular practice, that there are a number of domestic airline firms that have wide-body aircraft. Whether it's Airbus, 777 of Boeing, or the others, So I think that's something that they have to.
I think the Minister of Foreign Affairs, gave some clarification as to this. I didn't quite get the clarification, but he did. That issue was raised, and he did try to clarify, the state of things. But Bayo, we just have less than 60 seconds to look at the editorial,
yes.
And it's on overhauling Nigeria's health sector. Basically, I think this is from the pilot. It's just calling on governments at all levels to take advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic situation to, address revitalize our healthcare system, basically, which is so obvious anyway.
Yes, COVID-19 has destroyed every myth regarding coexistence around the world. And what he's saying is that the high and the mighty and the low are all stuck at home. And so the best approach is to make sure that we make provisions for our equipment in the hospitals, thinking and planning ahead to make sure that we have facilities enough to take care of our people, instead of what it used to be, where people, especially the mighty, used to embark on tourism, health tourism. He's saying that if investments are made here, it will benefit everybody for effective healthcare. Particularly, they are referring to the Abuja Declaration of the AU, determining about the percentage of the budget that should be allocated. Currently, the current budget means about 300 naira, according to the editorial, for every single Nigerian. That is not good enough.
Okay. Bayo, well, thanks a lot for being around. Just a point of correction that papers may also need to worry about. The latest death in Kano of an academic at Bayo University. Some reports are saying that he retired some time ago. But I mean, in the same story, he's referred to as a professor, and in another paragraph, he's been referred to as a senior lecturer. A senior lecturer is lower in rank than an associate professor. An associate professor is lower in rank than a professor. So better get it right, if it's a professor or a senior lecturer.
All right, Bayo. Break a leg as you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week, hopefully, by the grace of God. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Let's take a break now. When we come back, we'll start our conversation. All right, welcome back. Now let's kick off our conversation today on Good Morning Nigeria as we listen to this background put together by our correspondent Victor Azu.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19 across the world, medical experts have maintained that apart from people with underlying illnesses, the elderly are the most vulnerable group of persons to the pandemic. In any case, this is because elderly people have chronic medical conditions such as hypertension, heart disease, and diabetes that can exacerbate the symptoms of COVID-19. The ability of the immune system to fight off pathogens also declines with age, leaving elderly people vulnerable to severe viral infections. This awareness has led to health professionals advocating measures that protect the elderly from being exposed to the contagion. This is also expected to curtail fatality rate as the virus continues to dictate the pace of activities globally. However, older people need to regularly frequent public health facilities to receive chronic medication or care and are therefore at risk of exposure in these settings. So, what measures should health authorities put in place to shield the elderly from exposure to COVID-19? What is expected of the elderly themselves at times like these? How can they continue to get attention for existing health conditions without the risk of contracting COVID-19? These issues and more are expected to influence the conversation on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Victor, so many thanks for that background. Just a point of reminder, our conversation this morning is, of course, on COVID-19 and care for our aged and the elderly. So let me quickly introduce our guests who are already here in the studio. Let me start with Senator Eze Ajoku, who is President, Coalition of Societies for the Rights of Older Persons in Nigeria, Kotropin. Thank you very much, Senator, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
I also like to introduce a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria, and that's Dr. Omokaro. She is the Executive Director, Dave Omokaro Foundation, and also co-convener and co-chair, Stakeholder Group on Aging Africa. Dr. Omokaro, thank you once again. Good to see you.
All right. Also with us here in the Abuja studios is Mrs. Victoria Ono. She's the founder and CEO of Grace Nursing Care Center here in Abuja. Mrs. Ono, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you.
And from our Benin Network Center, we're being joined by Obehi Akoria, who is a professor of medicine at the School of Medicine, University of Benin, and a consultant geriatrician and deputy chair of the Medical Advisory Committee of the University of Benin Teaching Hospital. Professor Obehi Akoria, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigeria. Thanks for having me here.
All right, so let's begin this conversation by contextualizing it. I mean, part of the information out there is that one of the high-risk groups in terms of the susceptibility of infection usually will be persons who are said to be advanced in age, the elderly. Exactly what does this mean now to those who are old in our society? Let's begin with Dr. Omokaro.
Thank you very much. It is now called internationally comparable data.
Sorry, Dr. I'm sorry to cut you. We're trying to address some technical issues here in the studio, so we'll get back to you. But let's get to Benin, where, of course, we have Professor Obehi Akoria to, of course, answer the question that Kingsley has just raised.
Yeah, well, Prof, I posed the question. It was supposed to be an open question, but first inviting Dr. Omokaro to take the question. That namely, part of the information out there in the public domain is that the elderly belong to the high-risk group of persons likely to contract coronavirus. And that what does this mean, therefore, for us as a people who have the elderly living amongst us in Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much. We are concerned about the vulnerability of our elderly population in the face of the current pandemic. Even before now, the elderly have been identified as a vulnerable group in this country for many reasons. As part of aging, there's what we call immunosenescence, which has to do with the fact that the immune system is not quite as good as it was earlier in life. This is even in the absence of disease. The meaning is that head to head, an older adult is less likely to mount up adequate immunity to fight off disease than a younger adult. Fast forward to COVID-19, our elderly persons are vulnerable on many fronts. Age is a factor that we cannot influence, so they are vulnerable by virtue of their age and reduced immunity. Our older persons are also vulnerable on several other fronts that impact directly or indirectly on their health status. For example, access to care, access to resources like money, poverty is very pervasive, and there is a vicious cycle between poverty and disease and outcomes of disease. There is also the challenge of ageism, which we describe as systematic discrimination against anyone because the age is a particular number. In the face of the current pandemic, there is the possibility, even though we may not come up front with it, that older persons are likely to suffer from discrimination. It is not uncommon to hear our people say, "He don't try. At least he has lived to be so and so age." So that is another fourth potential source of vulnerability for older persons in Nigeria, where the value that is placed on a life that is aged 80 may not be the same value that is placed on the life of someone who is aged 40 or 30. There are other areas in which older persons may be vulnerable in the face of COVID-19. For example, we talk about atypical presentation of disease. A lot of times, older persons do not present with the typical features that we associate with certain disease conditions. And that means that the likelihood of diagnosing and instituting early treatment is less. Again, these are the people who have a higher prevalence of chronic diseases like hypertension and diabetes and chronic obstructive airways diseases, amongst others like cancers. And we know from what we are seeing across the globe that people with chronic diseases are more susceptible to having more severe diseases and worse outcomes on the whole.
All right, thank you, Professor Akore, there for your opening remarks. Again, let's throw the ball to Dr. Ememomokoro. Eleron, of course, we wanted to start with you. Thank you for your understanding. I just again like you to, speak to the question that Kingsley raised. But I would like you to explain, because there are, studies that have shown that rather than the aged or the elderly, being more prone to infection, that the younger, ones, because of the probability of their physical movement, they are mobile, they are actively mobile. Yeah. So they are at greater risk. So what places the elderly, at a greater risk? Is it behavioral issues or biological issues?
Thank you very much. And I thank the professor for giving that context. She is the one that is a medical doctor.
Yeah.
But I think we have to distinguish between being a carrier of the disease, being asymptomatic, contracting the disease, and the actual effect of the disease, what the disease does to your body. As she said, disproportionately, older persons are known to have comorbidities. Non-communicable diseases affect older persons disproportionately. And because of the existence of the preconditions, then you find that an older person who contracts COVID-19 stands, the chance of being adversely, critically diseased, sick, whereas the younger person, can be sick mildly, can be moderate, but may not be as severe. And I also want to say here that it is not strictly only older persons who have pre-existing conditions. So the younger person, 30 years, may have pre-existing conditions and may be on some immunosuppressive drugs. That younger person also stands the risk as severe as the older persons. But unfortunately, because of the numbers, we have seen internationally comparable data, the numbers from Europe to the US, even now to Africa. Although Nigeria, we still haven't gotten to that disaggregation of the death tools. We will see that older persons, have, like the report showed, 5 times the global average from age 80 years. But I also want to put it in the context. When we talk about older persons, we find older persons in different scenarios, in different contexts, because when we say older persons, and the United Nations says 60 years and above, there's that tendency to think that there are no variations. You also have older persons that have strong immune systems, and they are, they grow healthy and they are ready to go.
One recovered just recently, I heard.
Exactly.
A 92-year-old.
Exactly. And then you have older persons, who are even on the front line fighting. You see, even doctors being recalled, who are retired and being recalled, on the front line fighting. So older persons are a variety of persons. So this is to disabuse minds from stigmatization, and older persons, you're weak, you're vulnerable, you're that. So that is the ageism she was talking about. And then I also want to put it within the context of development. You know that we declared this year, a decade, this was supposed to be the window into the decade of healthy aging. Because now the globe wanted now to concentrate on functional capacity of older persons, healthy aging. And then, of course, this was also to be the year where we are supposed to accelerate action on sustainable development goals. And now behold, COVID-19. So COVID-19, I want to say here, has exposed the fact that there have been exclusion and inequality. Focus had not been put on non-communicable diseases and access to health, like she said, access to nutrition and hunger. So we find that the older population, the geriatric population, is a population that has suffered from the mortality, the morbidity, and the socio-economic impact of the disruption, the lockdown that we see. Because when you talk about poverty, chronic poverty, multidimensional poverty is what you see amongst the older population. You find these older persons in prison circumstances, precarious situation where it's overcrowded. You find older persons in IDP camps where it is overcrowded. You find older persons in rural and very remote areas where resources may not get there. You find older persons in city slums. So you find older persons scattered everywhere. And they are vulnerable. So the question will be, how do we reach older persons? What do we do within the communities?
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Emelo Mokaro. We're going to pause here and then return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's bring in now Senator Eze Ajoku. Senator Eze Ajoku, but give us your own feel of what's playing out under the radar of the pandemic that we are seeing. What's been the national experience with the elderly and COVID-19?
Well, the national experience, as you can see from all that has been said, and from the doctor, from Dr. Makaro, is the fact that the older persons are at the highest risk at this point in time. If you look at the number of recoveries, you can count 1 or 2 older persons who recovered. The rest are younger people. If you look at the death rate in Kano, in other places, it's more of older persons. And like your first question, you see, the older persons most times are at home. The mobile youths go out there and bring the infection home and interact with the older persons. They can recover easily, but the older persons don't. Because you find that the older persons are not carriers of this disease. So most times when people try to stigmatize older persons, they are not the carriers. Someone brings it home to them. Everybody is nervous now about the export of amajuris. Some of them have COVID to other parts of Nigeria. The older persons at home are getting worried. What will happen in our community when these amajuris infect people like they've done in Kano? You'll find that what will happen is that it is the older person who suffers most. He has little or no chances of recovery. And when you look at what is happening in Italy, in New York, they are making decisions on who to treat and not who to treat because they are overwhelmed. We don't want a situation in this country when the value of the life of an older person no longer counts, and you now make a decision to treat a younger person on the assumption that the older person has lived his life. But that's not true. I'm an older person because in a few months now I'll be 73. My mother is an older person, she's 101. Many of us are still contributing. It is the older persons who are doing the farm work in most areas. And therefore, we shouldn't allow the older persons to be wiped out. Nigeria should begin to step up, like she has said. Take actions. One, to begin to treat the communicable diseases of older persons, which creates the lower immunity. Begin to provide them drugs, discounted drugs for treatment like they did for HIV. The point is that older persons have never come into the numbers equation in this country. They've been discriminated by policies, by laws, by everything. And so you find a situation where right now the COVID-19 is exposing the neglect, complete neglect of the older citizens.
Okay, let me pause you because you are fast forwarding to a very critical point. Let me also bring Mrs. Victoria Ono, who is founder Grace Nursing Care Center. You have a direct contact with, of course, the elderly and the aged. You've heard now, it's not just the elderly that have underlying, medical conditions. Even the young ones, age 40, 30, and also do have, comorbidities. So everyone is predisposed to contracting, the virus. But my question is, what do you think makes the aged and the elderly, specifically susceptible? He has mentioned discrimination. Could lack of care be a prime reason?
I think by the time a lot of people get to that stage where they're seen as older persons, some of them are subjected to other people's care. They can't take care of themselves anymore. And they need the help of others. So unlike most of us, we can do things by ourselves, but because they need carers, and those carers go out, they're the ones that, interact with people, they're the ones that go to market. The tendency is that they will bring these things home. They will bring the COVID home. So they are more susceptible. Those of us that can take care of ourselves can decide whether we'll be locked in, who you want to touch. But the older persons don't have a choice. Somebody has to take care of them. Somebody has to bathe them. Somebody has to take off their clothes and all that. So there is no social distance when it comes to care of the older person. So I think that really makes them vulnerable and subject to infection.
The fact that you cannot really implement social distance, when it comes to the aged, care of the aged.
Yes.
That's a prime factor.
It's a big factor, yes.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Mrs. Ono was taking it from the point that, Claire, you posed the question. I mean, Senator Ajoko is here, is closing on 73, and is able to look after himself. How did you come into the studios? And you are lucid? I mean, that's the point. I mean, it's so, as MM indicated, you have a broad spectrum of persons who are elderly, those who are in dire need of care and assistance and all of that. So, but we'll still return to that particular aspect because care is one of your areas of specialization. That's Mrs. Victoria Ono. I would like us to return to Professor Obehi Akora in our Benin Network Center. Professor Obehi, yes, we have seen in terms of your various explanations how vulnerable the elderly could be under the current circumstances of COVID-19. But what can the elderly themselves do to lower their vulnerabilities or otherwise lower their risk of exposure to the coronavirus?
Thank you very much. Before I talk about what the elderly can do, I need to clarify on an issue. I like the fact that you have emphasized that the stereotype about aging having to do with disease needs to be erased, because as we can see, there are a lot of elderly people who are active and contributing to society. However, aging by itself is associated with physiological changes that do not necessarily manifest as disease. There is a delicate balance between those physiological changes and the manifestation of disease, and that depends on exposure. So one of the things the older person can do is reduce the risk of exposure to the virus. So whether you are physically fit, as a lot of the older persons I know are, or whether you are living with hypertension or diabetes or any other condition for that matter, the universal precautions that have been put out for everyone applies to every older person. Sanitation, hand hygiene, frequent hand washing with clean water and soap. It's not easy to say don't touch your face, but as much as we can, we should avoid touching our faces. We just heard how that the older person may be in his home and have exposure from people who go out and come in. We also heard from the CEO of Grace Homes how that for those who are frail and require caregiving, there may be no social distancing. So, in such circumstances, it is advisable for our older persons to wear face masks. Not all of us may have access to medical or surgical masks, but there are a lot of guidelines provided as to how we can make our own face masks using materials available to us at home. And so we can achieve some protection by hand washing, using our face masks and keeping our distances, and then treating underlying conditions for those who have those conditions. That's what you can do. Again, much of what the older people can do to help themselves depend on what is not within their control. For example, eating well. People need to eat good food to have good immunity. However, if they are poor and cannot afford food, or if there is even food and there is no caregiver to assist with feeding. Somebody alluded to elder mistreatment. It is prevalent. There are some people whose challenges have to do with access. There are other people whose challenges have to do with mistreatment. So the concept that there are a lot of things that our older persons can do to help themselves is right. But I would also like us to think that beyond themselves, there is a lot that society can do to help older persons be in a position to help themselves even more.
To you soon. Let me throw the ball again to Mrs. Victoria Ono. She has mentioned something about complying with some of the preventive guidelines, especially as regards the subject of our conversation this morning, the elderly and the aged. How easy is it, from your perspective? How easy will it be to reduce the risk of exposure for the elderly, considering that nuclear family is not attractive for us? We are all products of extended families. As I speak, I live with a number of my family members in my home. So how easy is it, for instance, to reduce the exposure? How easy is it to maintain social distance in the home, especially extended home?
Okay. I would like to tell a story. My mom recently, she is 82 years old. She didn't have her drugs, and she had to go to the chemist to get it.
Herself?
And then, yes, she has to do it herself because she says she has to explain to the people what she wants. I was scared. I told her, why would you do that? You could just write your prescription. Say no. They won't know the one that is fake, and they won't know the one that is this. Remember that older persons are finicky, about a lot of things. And they would like to know, have their things done by themselves. And then you're telling her, Mommy, you shouldn't go out. Mommy, you need to do this. And she's saying, so who will do it for me? How will I do it? And they can be very stubborn.
Yes.
They know what they want. So now how do you go from there? How do you now handle people like that, who insist that things must be done the way they want it? And that she told me, now what for this world though? They say the longer you live. I'm trying to translate it in English. It will not be as sweet. They say the longer you live, the more you get into trouble. I don't know how to say it, but it's in Igbo. It said, "Asi anowa anokuru." That is, you get into more trouble the longer you live. That nobody in her whole life, she never imagined this kind of thing would happen, and she would lose her independence. So for older persons, it's difficult absorbing these times. They can't understand it. And that is why it is important that there should be grassroots sensitization, one-on-one, going out, telling people, or especially the older persons, what this COVID-19 means, what it can do, how they can, actually take care of themselves, how they can prevent it. Doctor said that they need to wear face masks. Tell an older person that I'm coming to take care of you. Please wear your face mask. I'm coming. She'll say, which kind of wahala be this? Those are practical things. So what we need to do, for me, is information. We need to get information out to them. We need to make it personal, and we need to intensify our publicity. So I think we really need to do something about them.
All right. Thank you very much, Mrs. Onu, for your response. I want to bring in again Dr. M.M. Mokaro. Well, let's have your perspective on this in terms of how the elderly amongst us can also take personal responsibility to lower their risk of contracting COVID-19.
I had said earlier that it's not a homogeneous group. Now, we have older persons like my distinguished senator here, who is very aware, is very informed, and is very determined to be responsible for his life. There are few older persons like that. You have older persons in very precarious situations. There are some older persons that suffer from dementia, cognitive impairments, and they are in homes, and probably had caregivers who, because of the shutdown, they could not approach. And now members of family had to take care. And I want to say here, 1 in 6 older persons are abused. Situations where you have urinary incontinence, you have all those things, they are abused, they are pushed in and locked. And now the COVID-19 that is talking about isolation may aggravate abuse and violence. So what can be done? I think that information, like you said, is necessary. But besides that, we already have some capacity. I'm talking about community now. The community, attempt to protect the vulnerable, and the community attempt also to slow down community transmission, which is very important. We have some capacity and some infrastructure at the grassroots. Some older persons, even in isolation, also still have some members who love them. These are people we love. These are our grandmothers, our grandfathers, some of them. And there is nothing like communicating in love, even in isolation. That care, that social support. She was talking about her mother going out to go and get medication. And I'm sure, for instance, if maybe somebody had called, because somebody had called a pastor, maybe, that the woman believes in. Some Nigerian, we have spiritual inclination. Please don't go. Let another person go. I'm just using that as an example. So we have to use the infrastructure that we have. It can be the family infrastructure that we already have. It could be the ward infrastructure, the women organization infrastructure, the union infrastructure. We have infrastructure where we can pass information and pass it in such a way that it is collective. It's not only you doing it, and you're not doing it for your sake, you're doing it for the sake of your children, you're doing it for the sake of our network, because all of us must stay alive. So it is to utilize the community infrastructure to make sure you get the information. And then not only I hear, most of the advice that we hear is what you should do to keep it away. But more so, we need to send out information that will tell people how to recognize the signs and the symptoms. How do you recognize the signs and the symptoms? And when you do recognize the signs and the symptoms, what do you do? Is there an emergency response? Who do you call? How many people know that number? And even when they call, who is on the other end? What will happen? So it's a whole link. It's multi-stakeholder response. From the public to the private to the community to the family to the individual.
Are you discussing this in the Nigerian context?
I'm discussing in the Nigerian context.
Or in the advanced context? I mean, because I would like you, just a minute, I would like you to continue. Yeah. But how would you illustrate, therefore, what happened in Kano against the background of your prescription? A kind of being that a number of elderly persons were dying, and they said some of them had high blood pressure, active malaria.
Somebody dropped the ball.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Somebody dropped the ball. Because nobody may have recognized the symptom. You see, for a long time, that still has not been linked to COVID-19. They call it strange illness. Whereas if information had gone out, and if it was translated in the local language, and if it was made to be collective, this is our collective welfare. If it happens to one, it goes through the community, all of us are dead. If it had been done like that, maybe by an imam that they respect, something really gone down, you know, then somebody would have recognized this particular death is because of the symptom and the sign they recognized. So what do we do? And now, instead of denying, the person, the actor responsible for cutting off that community, you know, bringing in testing and testing and testing and isolation, it would have been able to curtail that and save the entire society. But there was no information, and nobody took responsibility.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let me bring the distinguished senator. You've listened to what she said, and also what Mrs. Ono, you know, the illustration Mrs. Ono gave about her own mother. It's obvious that a lot of the aged and the elderly are in denial. You know, it's not easy to convince them to change their old ways. A lot of them don't even believe that, you know, there's anything like COVID-19. So most of them are not willing to, you know, comply with some of the preventive measures. Do you see this arising from policy response, you know, not, you know, capturing, you know, that age bracket?
I do not agree that older persons are in denial. What I can say is that there has been lack of education with the older persons. You know, if you go to our communities, many of them are still living as if nothing is happening. Even Maraba here, go to some of the communities. So what is required is the education of both those who give the older persons the information and the older persons themselves. Older persons are reasonable. If you tell them this thing will kill you, they don't want to die even though they are old. No older person wants to die yet. So I believe that in addition to policies and other things, there's not enough sensitization of our rural community. We just signed an agreement.
Yes.
We just signed an MOU with NOA to be able to go and sensitize and create awareness in the rural areas. NOA has a structure on ground with the 774 local governments. We are concerned about educating older persons in rural areas.
Do you know why I want to still say some of them, if not all, most of them, are still in denial? My mother is in the village, and every day I call her, and she tells me, "Oh, Orianduku, you know, it's the big man's disease."
That's the education.
Yes, and I keep telling her it's not the big man's disease.
That's what the people around her told her.
They are aware of the disease. They are aware that people die from it, but they still believe that it is not for them. Isn't that denial? I don't know.
What I'm saying is this. Look, the older person gets information through a source. How did she know that it's big man's sickness? It is because most Nigerians At first, we're saying it is those who travel out and come in. We're now at the stage of community to community transmission. And therefore, we just need to, on a national level, change the narrative and let people in the rural areas understand that it is no longer the big man sickness. It is now something that is passing from someone in your community to you. And once people understand that, I'm sure the situation will change. If the person looking after your mother now begins to tell her, Mama, it's no longer old people's big man sickness. So my mother is being looked after by my younger one. One day she called me and said, look, they say we should stay indoors. And that she sees people, hears the voice of people on the street and they are going around. Why are we locking her here? And I pleaded with her, I said, Mama, just wait, this thing will pass. She said, okay, Mom, you know, my son, okay, if you say so. Mothers, older persons are looking for people to educate them, give them the assurance. Then they will own the preventive measures. Once you can get people to own hand washing, isolation, mask, and all that, it will become part of their life. So the education, the Presidential Task Force needs to fund mass education. They need to fund organs of government that are supposed to go to these rural areas and educate people, translate the messages in their local languages, you know, do all these things. And that's where organizations like come in. That's why we went to sign a memorandum with them to create sensitized people. But we don't have funds to do it all in the 700. And we expect that government should step in at this time and see the willing hands who are ready to work and fund them. And that's what we're expecting. And I tell you, those in rural areas, if they are properly educated, they will change. Remember that most of the older persons they don't have phones, they are not in social media and all that. They are only living by hearsay. It is the hearsays that we need to change.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Ajoku. I mean, three of us here in the studios, we all talked about your mom, Mrs. Onu. Senator Ajoku, your mom is 101. Congratulations. Claire also talked about her mom. I still have a mother. But I think our experiences are probably slightly different. And maybe you even talked about your mom. Obehi in Benin hasn't also talked about her mom. Senator Ajoku keeps referring to older women in the rural areas. There are older women who are living in urban areas. And I think that it's, from my interaction with older persons, including my mom, in the urban areas, there's a great deal of awareness as to COVID-19. I mean, as soon as there was a landfall of COVID-19 in the country, my mom started telling me, well, aside from the fact that one of my younger brothers is a medical doctor, who therefore is a personal physician, so she has that access. But here is a point that I would like us to also address. For those who are aware amongst the elderly persons, I mean, I know some persons say, look, I don't longer go to the market because ordinarily that would be a form of exercise. And I was saying people, that's part of the risk that Onu was explaining, that persons who are outside and interacting with others, if they now come back into the house, how do you regulate social distancing and so on and so forth? But here is the point, because those who are also aware are aware of the fatalities arising from COVID-19. I mean, we've lost, I'm sure, when you see the numbers in the U.S. where over 73,000 persons have died, considering the way we are, you know one or two persons, one or two relatives who have also passed on, and they themselves have had access to this information. If you recall, Professor Obehi, I want you to take this one first. It looks like a long time ago, but on Good Morning Nigeria, about 2 months ago, we did take on aspects of managing anxiety and panic with regard to the forthcoming disease that everybody was hearing about in Italy, about in Germany and Spain, and then the US. For those who are aware of their own vulnerabilities, and indeed the fact that this is a pandemic, that they have to stay indoors, reduce interaction except for little exercises, how can they on their own manage anxiety and panic attacks that may arise from the fact that, look, I maintain social distance, I don't do this, I don't do that, and that death probably is around the corner?
Question. Thank you very much. If you will indulge me, I will just take a few steps back and speak to some of the issues raised by our Honorable Senator. The general sense is that older persons are at the receiving end of the messaging. And that in itself is a type of stereotype. Can we imagine a different narrative where older persons are providing the messaging or contributing to providing the messaging? So we are seeing on our local TV stations, we are hearing their voices over the radio, and they are telling us, maybe from their homes, what they know about this, what they are doing to prevent getting infected. Maybe one or two who have been infected and have recovered, sharing their experiences and talking about all the support that they got. Changing that narrative alone, I think, we go a long way to assuaging the anxieties of older persons regarding this disease. Because I can see that it will be easier for an older person to relate to a message that is coming from someone from a similar age category rather than to a young person who is speaking. So one way to do it is to change the whole structure about how we are sending out messages right now. Inclusiveness requires, in my perspective, that we get older persons who are well, who are strong, who are, even the older the better, and get them to join the team that is providing the messaging. Then, for themselves, anxiety can arise from external sources, but there can also be anxiety that is a disease on its own, anxiety disorders. So, we will need to manage the kind of information that we give to our older persons. We've heard so far on this program that there are a lot of older persons who are competent. They have decision-making capacities. For those older persons, it's easy for them to choose what they listen to and choose what they will not listen to. Then for those of us who have them as our mothers and our fathers, aunties and uncles, we can support by reinforcing positive narratives. And then, if we find that, I really don't like that term isolation. Yes, we need to keep them indoors, but we can provide support so that they do not feel ostracized. It is possible for us to keep them indoors and still love them. It is possible for us to still let them know we value them. And that sense of autonomy, reinforcing that sense of dignity, I think we go a long way to address the issues of anxiety and depression that may be related to COVID-19. Then also we need to know when to call in for professional help. If we find that these symptoms are getting out of hand, then we need to ask for help. Again, let's be mindful that presentation of anxiety and depression in the elderly may be very different from how it presents in the young.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Akore, Professor Akore. Mrs. Ono, you run a care center here in Abuja, and I want to believe you also, I don't know if you do have, some elderly ones amongst them, and if you do, what is your messaging template to them?
Okay, actually we had a few of them, and just about the time that this, there was this news that brought about nursing homes, some of them came and took their loved ones away. For those ones that are in the home, we educate them so that they can take kindly to the fact that they can't have visitors from, outside.
What are you telling them?
We tell them about COVID. We tell them about social distancing. We tell them about the fact that they are wherever they are coming from, we are not sure that they are not infected, but that we need to protect them, and that it is better that they are protected because they could, they don't have the capacity to resist as much as the young ones that are coming to them. For one particular person, it was difficult for him to understand why the grandson cannot hug him. And I happened to be around that day, so I had to tell him that it's just something we have to do to protect him and that he should help us. And then the person that came to visit him said, so does it mean that Papa cannot carry my child? It was heart-wrenching. It wasn't easy, but we had to maintain that, distance. We had to make sure that we respected that.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Victoria. I know both Senator Ajoku and MM are itching to also respond to the issue that is on the plate, but we have to take a short break now. When we return from that break, we'll take their comments as well as take a look at the tweets that we already have. All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, so let's return to Dr. M.M. Omokaro and Senator Ajoku. Well, first, Dr. M.M. Omokaro, Professor Obehi was responding to the issues of how, for those who are aware amongst the elderly, how might they reduce the effect of anxiety and panic, considering that there are fatalities that are reported daily around the world.
I want to shift a bit from the medical. And I want to say that I go back. Variation in the group. They are the ones that are very chronically poor, multidimensionally poor. There are families, we're talking about our fathers and mothers, we may be able to afford to give them. But there are families that are really, really poor. And when we talk about anxiety, the anxiety may not necessarily be because of medical condition situation. The anxiety is because they have not been able, they can't afford to stockpile provisions in times like this. They cannot afford to stockpile medicines in times like this. The anxiety comes from that exclusion, that inequality. And this COVID-19 has really exposed that most Nigerians were just eking subsistence from hand to mouth. They really don't have access, and they don't have, very profitable activities that they could afford 2 weeks without work. So where you find an older person, and I want to say here that most of these older persons are in very precarious situations. They may not necessarily be members of a household. You have older women who are just head of the household and they live with minors. You have older men also who have been ostracized. You have even persons with dementia who have been stigmatized, and they don't count them among the households. So when we talk about anxiety, I want to talk about the socio-economic impact of the mitigation and the containment strategies that have been brought. The times now, some of you of them who were depending on their sons and daughters, hawking and selling and just making money. And now they no longer have it. So anxiety will come, but what do I eat? What do I give my mother to eat? And now we know that, I don't know why, I've not heard, I don't know if it's official, most medical services have been cut down. There's been a downscaling of access to healthcare. You go to clinics, they no longer want to attend to cases that are not COVID-19 cases. They say, except it's emergency, we don't. So that anxiety may come. Suppose I fall sick. Where do I go? What's the emergency response system? So anxiety comes not necessarily because you're afraid of dying. Anxiety comes because the environment is not enabling.
You don't have
access to. You don't have access. There is anxiety. Your health may fail. No access to healthcare. Hunger may kill you. No access to resources. And I want to say here again that of all the demographics in Nigeria, older persons are those who do not have social protection flaws that are official. They do not have. So you have so many multidimensionally, poor older persons. They don't have anything to depend on. A few, I keep saying here, a few are on formal pensions, federal government pensions, private pensions. They are not up to 800. About altogether, plus the private pension, plus PITAT and PENCOM, the contributory pension scheme, they are about 978,000. So what about the rest who did not have opportunity to work full-time in a formal organization? So we have persons that have retired, older persons, subsistence farmers that no longer can farm. Some of them who had farmed on their last breath, now they no longer can farm.
I was just wondering, take this just very quickly before we bring in Senator Ajoku. The NBS, National Bureau of Statistics, released its latest figures of poverty, saying that there are about 82 million poor Nigerians.
Yes.
Are the elderly captured in this category so that when you disaggregate it, then maybe as a policy implication, we might then know who to target? Because what you keep hearing mostly from policymakers, which is understandable, is provide jobs for our teamy youths.
Exactly.
Is it possible that we also have teamy elderly people?
Exactly.
All right.
So I want to say, unfortunately, that the way data is sourced, the demand for surveys in Nigeria, you have to, NBS, surveys on demand, and it's the government that places that demand. And if you look at national surveys before now, national surveys never really captured older persons. I know specifically national surveys on malaria didn't capture older persons. National surveys on well-being did not capture older persons. And when we, approach NBS to look for any kind of data on older persons, they say, Madam, unfortunately, we can't lie to you. We do not have. So now, apart from that, now the presentation of this data on poverty, most cases, except maybe if you approach and they can now, they are not presented in disaggregated form. It's a national aggregate summary. They say, 82 million Nigerians are poor. Who are the 82 million Nigerians on sex and gender and age? So that is the question you asked.
That's right.
Unfortunately, I don't know whether that is possible. No. Even the social investment program.
No, it doesn't.
If you approach the social investment program, the household, the poor households,
it's household.
Disaggregated.
It's
you will not have. So
except some social imagination, I would put it that way, to say that if you were to go to a community, they would know those who are very poor in the community, and therefore you isolate them.
And that's how the social investment office. That's how they identify the poor households. It's the community. They work with the community to say this household is very poor, and they miss tests, and then they capture their biodata.
Distinguished, let's have your opinion also on this issue of, sources of anxiety and probably how you think, that can also be addressed. Do you share MM's views?
I totally share everything MM has said. But I want to add that anxiety for a lot of older persons also could be caused by the kind of information they get. Now, we were discussing before, you said that if older persons that are knowledgeable are able to share the information with the older persons, they will believe more the person from their category. And I think a lot of older persons are doing something about it. And that's why we wanted it coordinated through some agencies or individuals or in a community-based structure that could do that. I, for one, I have done jingle with my name. I am Senator Ajoku. I am one of you. I'm an older person like you. This and this is what I do, And it plays regularly on a radio station that I have influence over in Imo, saying, I'm an older person, this is what I do. Look, today is the third day I'm leaving my house in the last 5 weeks. Second time was last week when we were here, and then another one was just where I went to sort out something. So I've learned to stay at home because I know I have underlying issues, and I don't want to take the risk. And a lot of older persons who are educated, who are knowledgeable, are protecting themselves. They are using the mask, they are washing hands, they are observing social distancing, and they are staying at home and using sanitizer appropriately. But that is the message we need to take to minimize, the worries, because the scripture says, fear brings torment. When people are afraid and they're nervous, will I die tomorrow? Will I die next day? It's another problem. Okay, so in addition to poverty...
Yes, when we come back, you earlier on talked about discriminatory policy response.
Yes.
Yes, I want you to speak, further on that when we come back. We've got a number of tweets, and I can see more. They're bringing in more here. So, Kingsley, I think we should quickly just take exhaust this set before the next set comes in.
Let's go ahead with that. You can start off, yes.
Okay, let me quickly start off with Mike Anyako. And Mike says, Nigeria will bounce back again. Our cities will rise up again. Let's have it as a duty now to lend helping hands and care for less privileged, especially the elderly. We must protect them with all in our arsenal. They are senior citizens. We are now enjoying the fruits of their labor. It is now our time to see to their well-being. We must not allow them to go out anyhow. We must make sure they obey all the precautions against the disease.
Steve Bond tweets, states that are not owing pensioners have little problem. But those states that owe pensioners, their gratuities and others need to start prioritizing the welfare of senior citizens in terms of palliatives and Medicare.
And Dele Jack Solomon, if you're 65 and older and live where cases have been reported, he says, take action to reduce your exposure. Know what's going on locally. Pay attention to recommendations from your local public health department. And also, make sure you have adequate supplies of routine medications for blood pressure and diabetes. And of course, household supplies in case you need to remain at home.
Akeju Olagbaju, geriatric care is poor in our country. The elderly, especially the less privileged, rely on traditional family support. And the majority of the elderly live in rural communities that lack basic health infrastructure. Rural health education to prevent community spread is necessary now.
And Mogbola Babs, this category of individuals is the most vulnerable of all, from total neglect by the system in terms of proper framework for a welfare program for them, to indifference by the various governments, especially state governments, with reckless abandonment over the plight of those who are pensioners.
Ojo Olaiton, state governments need to authorize their local government chairmen to take out of their monthly allocation to buy some palliative goods and distribute them through councillors with proper monitoring.
All right, and we have Okaku David. We are all left to fate. As it stands today, it is every man for himself and God for us all. The elderly are everywhere, and most of them still have to engage in activities to take care of themselves. Even their so-called pension is not being paid. It's a sorry state for them at the moment.
Sonny Balarabe, as we are all in this, it's our collective responsibility to ensure that we do what it takes to encourage our elders, abide by the rules and measures set for preventing the rampant spread of this pandemic. Also, government needs to chart new ways to reach the elderly with palliatives.
And Bashiru says, because we know that the elderly, especially those living with comorbidities, are highly unlikely to survive if they contract COVID-19 virus, it's only natural that government immediately begins mass campaign targeted at the elderly on the need to ensure they only have minimal contacts.
Law Alpha say, now the virus will readily attack the elderly because they have weak body defense. So it's wise to take adequate care of them by adequate balanced diet, minor physical exercise, and personal hygiene orientation, among others.
All right, and Chris Simeon says, let me quickly summarize this. He says, federal and state governments should set aside greater portion of palliatives for the elderly in this hard time.
All right, Omabwala Ambas is repeating another one again. We earlier took him, Mutana Farouk. The immunity of elderly persons can be revitalized through proper feeding, regular exercise, adequate rest, regular medical checkup, and most importantly, showering of lovely care by family members. Rest of mind is a recipe for long life.
Innocent Yawal James is just saying, of course, that at this period in time that we should all extend the act of charity to the elderly, and it is their entitlement.
That's Yawa James you just read, I believe. Okay, yes. Now Abare has this too. The first thing is that elderly persons should be advised to adhere strictly to the COVID-19 preventive measures.
Okay, Ibrahim Bello, alongside nutrition and personal hygiene, there is also need for physical exercises to keep fit, and as well the use of remedies and natural supplements to boost their immunity.
First, Akimbo, we must keep our older people in mind while they must strictly follow social distancing measures and limit face-to-face interaction with friends and family where possible.
And Enoch, Ayuk, those older than 60 years with underlying comorbidity in particular, especially those with cardiovascular diseases, should be protected and given attention by their families.
Now, Usman Banu Kantu, to protect the old, the weak, and the sick is to take precautionary measures against all possible forms of contracting the virus, which is, of course, very taxing. And this can be done through enlightening the general public on how to safeguard and secure the vulnerable.
Okay, Cecilia Koroma is saying that for some time, he said the last 2 years, we've catered for the aged with free medicals and given irregular care, of course, which has kept them strong, if not stronger than some young. So I don't know whether she's insinuating that, free medical care for the aged is sustained.
Well, I wouldn't know, but quite certainly, yes. in some jurisdictions, once you hit a certain age, you have access to a number of free things. So, as has been canvassed, the cost of certain medicines that are geriatric in nature, but those costs are also reduced. But of course, for you to have that kind of sustained welfare system, people will have to start contributing from when they are young, strong, and working, so that you have a pool of funds to drive that. It's not simply at the end that you now say, look, come and have the benefit of all of that. In some societies, as we know, if you're riding a bus, a public bus, it's either you have a free pass or the fare is drastically reduced. There are a number of issues. I'm just wondering.
I'm done with
with the tweets. I want to just return to Professor Obehi before we come back to the studios. Obehi Akoria in our Benin Network Center. You kicked off by talking about the medical implication of reduced immunity amongst the elderly. And that point has also come up here. What can the elderly do in order to boost their immunity or otherwise prevent further suppression of their immunity, notwithstanding the presence of some ailments that people have after they are above 50 anyway?
Right, thank you very much. What the elderly can do for now, what the elderly can do for the future. So that's how we choose to approach this. For now, the healthy older person who fortunately has had a good life and has come to a point where they have no disease should just continue to do all those health promoting things that they have always done. Eat good food as much as you have, exercise as much as you can, use the social networks that are available to you to improve your mental and physical and psychological health. Avoid smoking. Avoid drinking, because these in themselves can, over time, affect your immunity in so many ways. Avoid self-medication. One of the most prevalent conditions with aging is arthritis. Many have it. And we know how unregulated our healthcare system is, and access to medicines that can potentially reduce immunity is unrestricted. For example, you go across the counter, you say, I have pain, and then they give you 3-in-1, 7-in-1, 9-in-1. Most of those medicines contain corticosteroids like prednisolone, which in itself can reduce your immunity. If you are ill, get treated as quickly as possible. Sometimes, in some situations, we need supplementation, especially where there's vitamin deficiency. We need supplementation with calcium, we need supplementation with vitamin D, and all these can boost our immunity.
All right, Professor Obehi Akoria, would like to really appreciate you your contribution for that. Let's quickly come back to the studio here. Distinguished Senator Eze Ajoko, briefly, you spoke about discriminatory policies, with regards to the elderly. Specifically for COVID-19, what would you like to see?
We would like to see a situation where more older persons can be captured under a social protection, ensuring that they have enough money to buy drugs, to eat, because those are the things.
Is it in the short run or in the long run?
I'm going to talk about short run, because we have the pandemic now, and that's where the issue is. In the long run, yes, all the experiences we have gained now should be able to count, in the new policies. But I'm worried that the most important thing for older persons, especially in the rural area, the poorest of the poor, is some fund now to be able to meet the medical and the nutritional bills. So something ought to be done. I'm worried when I watch TV and I see the people who are getting this 20,000. You can hardly find the oldest of the old people. The old people are not in those numbers.
Those that are more vulnerable to the COVID-19.
They are not in those numbers at all now. Just watch their programs. Who are people receiving these monies? Okay? We have done a small survey within Kosropin. And the older people we've spoken to in Benue, in Abia, in a couple of places in Calabar, don't know about any palliative. All right? So I am saying that we need to look at the policies that will empower the older person now to survive this COVID period.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. M.M. Mokaro, what would you like to see in terms of either policy response or the tweaking of programs already outlined, if not in progress, with regard to mitigating and containment of COVID-19?
First and foremost, now that some restrictions have been removed, I want to see where the public, the private institutions, for instance, the banks, all those, the markets, transportation, how governments can use their unions to really effect enabling environment where the social distancing, all the hygienes that need to be observed is observed. For instance, the bank. Why would the bank not now promote their e-platform more? Why would we find crowd in the bank? And some older persons are in there. And where these banks will have the empathy to make, create some line of service for older persons to separate them from the crowd. And that should go on. Where unions would take responsibility for the transport union, what they do. Where market unions would take responsibility and arrange the market in such a way, make sure everybody wears a mask and keeps the social distancing. And then now coming back to the palliatives for older persons, I would like to see local government and state government take responsibility and not just, lump the older persons in the crowd that go to line up to obtain the palliatives, but make sure that these palliatives get to them where they are. And where also the health facilities will relax and open up for older persons that already have pre-existing conditions.
Okay.
And finally, please, the social protection program. The federal government, they have for the youth, they have for the food, the feeding program for the children, and they have for businesses. There is nothing at all for older persons.
All
so
right,
that should be put in place.
What would you like to see, especially with the elderly in the state of pandemic, COVID-19?
Yes, one of the things I found out is the cost of drugs right now has escalated. And the elderly, of course, most of them are supported by their children. And those children have been locked up. So I think something should be done about older persons' drugs, especially those for hypertension, diabetes. They are there, the regular things that cut across older persons. The government should subsidize, actually subsidize the cost of those drugs.
All right, Mrs. Victoria Ono, CEO, Grace Nursing Care Center, Project Coordinator, Coalition of Societies for the Rights of Older Persons in Nigeria. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us for Good Morning Nigeria. Let me also appreciate Dr. M.M. Omokaro, Executive Director, Dave Omokaro Foundation, convener and co-chair, stakeholder group of Aging in Africa. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to have you with us. And distinguished Senator Eze Ajoku, President, Coalition of Societies for the Rights of Older Persons in Nigeria. We are glad to have you with us. And not forgetting, of course, from our Benin Network Center, we had Professor Obey Korea, Professor of Medicine, School of Medicine, University of Benin, and Consultant Geriatrician and Deputy Chair, Medical Advisory Committee, University of Benin Teaching Hospital. Prof, we appreciate your presence today on Good Morning Nigeria. All right, let's quickly